I first noticed the house at dusk, its silhouette standing like a dark question against the bruised sky. The road had narrowed to a single rutted track lined with gnarled oaks whose twisted limbs whispered secrets in the fading light. A cold wind slid through the trees, carrying the faint scent of wet moss and something older, like extinguished candle smoke mingled with the tang of rusted iron. My pulse quickened as I pulled the car to a stop beneath the sagging porch. The boards groaned under my weight, though I hadn't yet set foot on them. I pressed my palm to the warped doorframe. Its wood was slick with damp, and a single rusted nail jutted from the center of the door like an accusing eye. Beyond the threshold, I could feel the air shifting. The hush was absolute, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I drew in a trembling breath, tasting cold ozone and the faintest trace of mildew. The moment I turned the handle, the world outside fell silent. No wind in the leaves, no distant highway hum, only the soft scrape of the latch and my own ragged inhale. Inside, the hallway stretched into gloom. The floorboards underfoot sank just enough to make me stumble, sending a flurry of dust motes dancing in the beam of my flashlight. I hesitated, fingertips brushing the peeling wallpaper, its faded floral pattern curling into shadows that looked like crawling hands. Each step felt like trespassing into something forbidden, an echo of memories I couldn't place, as though I had dreamed this corridor before. The beam of light caught a narrow staircase climbing into darkness, the banister carved with shapes that resembled half-forgotten symbols. A chill bled down my spine, sharp and sudden, as though the house had breathed on me. I shone the light toward the far wall and froze. A door stood there, one I had not seen on the exterior plans. It was sealed shut with heavy wooden planks, their edges blackened as if by old smoke. The air around it was colder still, and I could swear I heard a faint, almost rhythmical thump from the other side, like a heartbeat beneath dead wood. My heart pounded, echoing in my ears. "Turn back," the silence seemed to say. But curiosity had already claimed me. I slid my hand into my pocket and felt the cool metal of my car keys, grounding me for a moment before I stepped forward, drawn by that impossible pulse. My flashlight beam quivered as I edged past the sealed door and stepped into what must have been the parlor. The air grew colder still, as though the house exhaled a breath of ice the moment I crossed the threshold. Every footstep felt weighted. The floorboards sighed under my weight, releasing a rasping whisper that trailed after me like a warning. I swept the light across a battered hutch draped in moth-eaten lace, its cracked china staring back at me with hollow, empty eyes. A faint metallic tang curled on my tongue, and I realized it was the taste of old blood, or perhaps rusted memory. The silence pressed in from all sides, broken only by the distant scuff of something moving upstairs, slow and deliberate, as if pacing a corridor that no longer existed. I forced my heart to slow, willing my breath to steady, and advanced toward a portrait hanging crookedly above a marble mantel. The frame was carved with twisting vines that seemed to writhe in the beam's glow, and the painting depicted a woman whose face was half shrouded in shadow. Her eyes seemed alive, tracking me with a sorrow so deep it echoed in my chest. Gently, reverently, I reached out to touch the gilded edge, and recoiled as the wood beneath my fingertips pulsed, warm and almost breathing. A soft click sounded behind me, like a lock snapping into place, and I spun to find the sealed door's planks now glimmering with fresh condensation. The timber bowed as if something pressed from within. My blood ran cold. There was no turning back. I had felt the heartbeat in these walls, and now the house knew my name. I raised the flashlight again, resolving to follow that pulse wherever it might lead, and I could already sense that the truth waiting beyond the planks would change me forever. I sank to my knees and pressed my shoulder into the warped planks. The wood groaned, splinters biting into my skin. A sudden rush of cold air met me, sharp as cracked ice, carrying the scent of wet earth and something acrid I couldn't name. I could feel the pulse again, slow, deliberate, like an invitation or a warning. Heart hammering, I wedged my flashlight under a loose board and levered it free. The beam fell into a narrow opening, revealing damp stone walls slick with moss and a floor strewn with broken shards of pottery. I slipped through, coughing as the air thickened with dust and decay. My boots crunched on gravel. Each step echoed in the tight space like footsteps in a mausoleum. Above me, the floorboards creaked under gravity I no longer felt connected to. I shone the light around, half expecting something to blink back at me from the shadows. Instead, I found only a passage carved into the earthen wall, its edges rough and jagged, leading deeper into blackness. My breath coated my lungs in frost. The air tasted of rust and ozone, as though metal had been bent until it sparked. I followed the tunnel, fingertips grazing damp stone that pulsed faintly beneath my touch. The beam picked out scrawled symbols in charcoal, concentric circles intersected by a crooked cross, like an eye pierced by time. My chest tightened. These markings were old, primal, yet fresh, as if drawn by a hand trembling with fear. A distant sound drifted up the corridor, something dragging itself across uneven ground. The scrape was soft but unrelenting, a slow insistence that reverberated in my bones. I froze, every nerve alight. The sound stopped. Silence collapsed around me, thick and suffocating. Then it began again, closer now, rhythm shifting toward my heartbeat. I swallowed hard. Turning back meant climbing through the planks and retreating into ignorance, but pressing on promised answers, and perhaps madness. My fingers closed around a jagged stone, heart pounding with both dread and determination. I took a step forward. The tunnel opened into a small chamber lit by a single shaft of moonlight leaking through a crack above. In its beam sat a wooden cradle, empty but for a thin layer of dust that shifted, as if something had just moved. I raised the flashlight with trembling hands. The cradle rocked. A soft sigh echoed in the chamber. My reflection, no, not mine, flickered in the pool of moonlight, pale eyes watching me from the far corner. I understood then that I'd passed the point of no return. The house had drawn me here, and now I could no longer leave without facing whatever lay in that cradle's shadow. The cradle's rocking grew more insistent, as though guided by unseen fingertips. My flashlight trembled in my grip, casting jittering shadows that leapt across the damp stone walls. The air pressed in, thick with the musk of wet earth and something sweeter, like rotting honey, inexplicably mingled with the sharp sting of ozone. I could hear a soft whimper, barely louder than my own breath, coming from within the cradle's empty depths. My heart skittered. Slowly, I knelt and leaned closer, squinting to pierce the gloom. The cradle's wood was splintered, but I could just make out a scrap of fabric tangled in its slats, a fragment of lace, yellowed with age and stiff with dust. My fingers brushed it, and a sudden chill tore through my arm, as though I'd plunged my hand into freezing water. The whimper rose to a thin, keening cry, echoing off the rough walls and seeping into my bones. I forced myself to stand and swivel the beam toward the far corner. There, half hidden in shadow, stood a small rocking chair, its paint cracked and peeling. I swallowed, ears ringing with the cradle's lament. The chair began to sway back and forth, though nothing sat in it. With each sway, the cry grew sharper, childlike terror twisted into something primal and pleading. My flashlight flickered. I blinked and the rocking stopped. Silence roared in my ears, then came a soft footstep, bare and careful, just beyond the pool of light. I froze, every muscle coiling. The footstep repeated, closer this time, and then another, softer still, as if someone was shifting weight. My fingertip tightened on the cradle's edge. A faint voice, girl soft and urgent, whispered from the corner, "Help me." I swung the light around, heart lodged in my throat, but saw only darkness and the empty chair. The whisper came again, a breath on the back of my neck. "Please." Panic and pity warred inside me. I wanted to flee, to tear back through the tunnel and hide in the car's safety. But the plea resonated with something deep in my chest, an echo of a promise I'd made long ago to protect the lost. I swallowed and stepped toward the rocking chair, each floor crumb crunching like a scream. The moment my hand brushed the chair's armrest, the room shuddered. The cradle slammed against the wall, dust cascading like ash. The whispered plea turned to a wail that twisted through me, raw and sorrowful. Then the cradle fell silent, and the rocking chair froze mid-sway. My breath pounded in the hush. I realized with a sudden clarity that the house hadn't lured me here for my fear alone, but to demand compassion, to free its captive. My goal no longer felt like escape, but redemption. I inhaled the damp air, galvanized by a responsibility I could not deny, and stepped deeper into the chamber's heart, determined to confront whatever bound that child's spirit and break the cycle that held us both prisoner. I pressed onward through the narrow gap, every breath shuddering with cold as the tunnel widened into a low-ceilinged chamber. The beam of my flashlight revealed a low stone altar at its center, draped in tattered cloth that smelled of damp linen and decayed petals. My boots crunched over fragments of porcelain, tiny plates and cups, glazed in faded pastel patterns. Shards scattered like the remnants of a forgotten tea party. A single porcelain doll sat propped against the altar's base, its painted eyes cracked and blank, staring up at me with an innocence forever lost. I knelt beside it, fingertips brushing the cracked paint, and felt the whisper of something sorrowful brush my mind. Behind me, the tunnel groaned, as if warning me that time itself might collapse. I pivoted, shining the light on the far wall, where scratches formed a makeshift ladder leading to a small hatch above. My throat tightened. The escape I had hoped for lay just beyond that trapdoor. But before I could climb, my gaze fell on a leather-bound book resting on the altar's edge. Its cover was worn, the spine split, and its pages yellowed with age. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside, a child's neat scrawl told of days spent hidden here, counting heartbeats to keep from going mad, whispering names to keep loneliness at bay, begging for forgiveness no one could offer. The air around me grew thick, heavy with unshed tears and choking regret. A sudden sob echoed through the chamber. I leapt upright, heart pounding as the doll toppled over, its head rolling away like a severed trophy. The sob came again, closer, more anguished, and I realized it wasn't the house making the sound, but the spirit of the child, trapped for decades in this silent prison. My chest twisted with guilt and empathy. I had come seeking answers, but now I cradled the weight of a lost life in my hands. The book fluttered open to a final entry. "I am sorry I broke my promise. Please let me go." The words burned like acid on my tongue. I stood, resolve hardening. The stakes crystallized, this specter's peace or my own. I climbed the scratched ladder, pulling myself through the hatch into a dusty attic room above. Moonlight spilled through a cracked skylight, illuminating an overturned rocking horse and more scattered tea set pieces. Beneath a pile of rotting newspapers, I found a small, rusted key. Its teeth were bent, but it fit the lock on the cradle in the chamber below. My breath trembled. I realized then that the child's apology was not only to themselves, but demanded from me an act of mercy. I descended back through the hatch, the attic's stale air giving way to the tunnel's chill. The doll lay face down where I left it, and the cradle's whisper returned, softer now, tinged with hope. Kneeling once more, I fitted the key into the hidden latch. The cold metal greeted me like a friend. With a measured turn, I heard the small click of release echo through the chamber. The boards fell away, and in the moonlit beam, the cradle stood empty and still, no rocking, no plea. Silence enveloped me, vast and fragile. In that hush, I understood the deeper truth. Memory can imprison us as surely as walls can. The child's spirit had been captive of their own regret, waiting for remembrance to set them free. And in freeing them, I felt something inside me shift, an unburdening of my own fears and unresolved apologies. The altar cloth drifted to the floor, revealing a carved name, Eleonora. I whispered her name into the silence, an offering of acknowledgement and release. A gentle breeze stirred the dust motes into a shimmering swirl, and I sensed her gratitude as a warmth in my bones. As I climbed back through the sealed door, I carried with me a new understanding. Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. I pushed through the hatch one last time, the chill of the tunnel giving way to the stale warmth of the parlor. Moonlight slanted through the cracked windows, illuminating dust motes that drifted like memory fragments. The cradle lay empty, its purpose fulfilled, and the sealed door behind me now sagged slack, as though forgiving my passage. My legs trembled, weighted by the enormity of what I had done and what I had become. Each breath I drew tasted faintly of ozone and damp stone, mingling with relief that was almost bitter. I made my way back across the hallway, the floorboards now silent under my boots. The portrait above the mantel, once so alive with sorrow, looked peaceful, its subject's shadowed eyes softened into acceptance. I paused, resting a hand on the cool marble, and felt the last thread of the house's pull unravel beneath my palm. Outside, the night breeze whispered through broken glass, carrying the faint scent of jasmine and fresh rain. The air no longer felt claustrophobic but oddly freeing, as though the house itself had exhaled the sorrow it had held so long. Stepping out onto the porch, I let the silence of the forest wrap around me. The oaks stood sentinel, their branches still creaking with ancient secrets, but their message had changed. Release, not trap. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, tasting cool pine and distant thunder rumbling across a sky about to break. In that moment, I understood that some doors are meant to be opened, not to trap us, but to set us free from the weight of our own regrets and forgotten promises. I climbed into my car, fingers tracing the worn leather of the seat, feeling both hollow and whole. The journey back would be long, but I carried with me Eleonora's forgiveness and a new compass for my own life. If this story lingered in the shadows of your mind, whisper a like and subscribe to Whisper Tales for your next nightly escape into anxious calm.